I was I'm 85, so I was born in 1927. And I was born on the Manor Estate in Sheffield. The Manor Estate currently, and for many years, has been notorious as a sink estate. And I suppose it was started to be built just after the First World War, and I arrived in 1927. And there were nice people on the estate and not so nice people. And I lived there for around 5 years when my parents decided to move. Mother and father, Walter Hawley, and Isabel, his wife, lived at a road called Stonecliffe Road. We lived there together with my grandfather, my mother's father, Frederick Gould, who was a file cutter. And as a young man, he'd gone to America to see relations and to see whether we ought to stay across there, and he didn't, which is why I suppose our generation is here now. And he came back, and grandmother died, so mother, being the youngest of the family, took grandfather in, and he took me round as a kiddie, and I have very, very fond memories of him, because father was working all hours God's end in order to start a business, which he did do. Father made things in wire, what's known as wire, it was mainly wire machine guards for industry. And so wire came in the little works, and completed goods went out, and 2 or 3 people did all the work in between. When I was 14, perhaps what I ought to say is, when I was 5 years old, we came to live in this road, which is Malcliffe Road at Hillsborough, in the roughly where the Sheffield Wednesday football ground is. And we went to live in the top house, which is a terrace house, in 1932, and we lived there for 5 years to 37, and then went to the next road. And it was just a small house, and we were a very happy family. And then we went across the road for 2 years because mother thought it would be nice. It was a bit posher, so we went to this house, and it wasn't what it was cracked up to be. At any rate, this house that I presently live in, back in Malcliffe Road again, was being built, and so in April 1939 we came to live here, and I've lived in it ever since.
Wow.
And I'm finishing my life here, I assure you.
They'll carry you out in a box from here, will they?
That's it.
Yeah. Okay. Did you have any brothers or sisters? Or
No.
Your only child?
No, I'm an only one.
Right. Okay, and where did you go to school?
Well, in Malcliffe Road, it's a very long road, and there's a school in the middle of it, right opposite the house we live in. And I went to school there, at Malcliffe Road School. I failed my 11 plus, went to the local school, I don't know what they call it. Well, it was Wisewood at the time, which was where the duffers went, that don't pass exams to go to grammar school, as it was then. But after being there a year, I went in for an examination to go to the junior technical school in town. And my God, I passed. And so I went to the junior tech. So that brings us up to about 1939-ish time. And then, as we say, there were a war on, the beginning of the Second World War. And father's small business, which was growing, but not terribly such, but it was never a large business in the accepted sense, was all his labour had gone to the forces. The government said, come on lads, you've got to fight. And so he was without labour. So a year into my schooling at that place, father said, I think you better leave there and come and help us. No doubt you'll be coming into the family firm in any case. So I left. and I started work with father in July 1941 when the Battle of Britain was on.
Is that something you wanted to do when you were a child? What would you have liked?
No, you don't have any ambitions. I didn't.
You didn't want to be a tool maker or go into the family business?
I'm the clue. No. However, being there, you start off right at the very bottom. There would be 4 or 5 young men, scruffy sturberts in Sheffield, all lived locally, which was behind the railway station. Don't like this train station business you talk about these days, it's balmy. Behind in what was called the Park District of Sheffield, and they were really rough. A different language they used from me, couldn't understand them. It's only 3 miles away. Very gruff. "No, Dandy, how da going on?" would be the greeting in the morning, and they didn't really mean anything bad by it, but it was just as though their fists were up so that if anybody was going to dot them one, they'd got them up there first. That's the impression. At any rate, they were very decent blokes, really. One of them had to have a fight with me at one occasion when I was there, but it's being the boss's son isn't the... I found being a boss's son was not all that easy in some ways, because they don't give you anything, you didn't get any perks at all, because if you got a perk, the others would expect one, so you don't get them. And you've got to be there on time, otherwise the others could be expected to be late, and so you're hammered into this situation where you are the example, and you've got to put up with it, which is all right. But I suppose after a while you start off with very menial tasks, very simple, and gradually you build up, sort of thing. But I started going to works with father, looking at machinery to measure them up. So they'd get a message that some factory inspector had been into a works and said, "We want those 4 machines guarding," and we'd go in, and you'd have to measure these machines up, make a drawing, a sketch. You would have to dimension it, take that sketch back, and a guard would be made, like a frame, as we called it, a skeleton, if you will. And then from that, wire mesh would be woven from wire, and from that you weave the wire and fasten it to the frame. It all gets finished off, painted. It looks absolutely beautiful when it's done. And you go take that finished guard and fit it to the machine. One would assume that factory inspectors go and check it up afterwards, but we never got any complaints, so it must always have been right. And so from 15 onwards, I was doing that class of work as well as other work. This health and safety makes me smile at times. It is necessary, of course, but I think it's well over the top. People use gloves every time they pick anything up these days. Couldn't possibly use gloves. Even if occasionally you'd burn your hands, you'd pick up some black hot piece of metal and you'd have a scar right across your hand, and you'd slap it to your face, and where the flesh of your face is, it would sink all the heat out of your hand and it would go away. You'd learn all sorts of tricks. Then I spent about 3 years in the forces, in the army. When I came out, things had changed, and father said it would be better if I didn't go back to the works. So I got a job selling tools in an ironmonger's in Sheffield. Then I went to a firm called Joseph Cleave in Manchester, which is a very high quality tool shop right in the middle of Manchester. Great place. I was there for 2 years, and after that I won't say got homesick, but I got the opportunity to, I heard on the grapevine somebody wanted somebody in Rotherham, and so I applied for the job, got the job, and started working in Rotherham as, if you like, the shop manager in another high quality tool shop. There aren't such things today. They've gone. Finished. Lives aren't like that anymore. Everything on the flaming internet or whatever. You can't go and ask any questions about, can you tell me whether this is suitable or that suitable? You know, but we did.
And so then you actually started your own shop.
I was at Rotherham for 9 years, and in 1959 I'd always got the end to starting my own shop in Sheffield. And I started in 1959 by buying a tiny business, and it was a one up and one down converted house of about 1800 vintage, clapped out, run down, and 2 years later the corporation pulled it down. But in that time I just started enough to build up enough business in order to take some new property, which I did across the road. And I was at number 6 Earl Street in Sheffield from 1961 to 89, and that's when I retired. I suppose it was around about 1950, and a man came in the shop to buy an electric planing machine, and I went to demonstrate this thing at his works. And whilst he's planing, I had a look round and I saw a joiner's brace on the wall, and I thought that's an unusual pattern I didn't seem to have seen before, and I acquired it, and it's that. So that's the very first tool that I actually acquired, and it's that set me off. Never before, ever, had I taken the slightest bit of interest in anything historical whatsoever, and that was it. So you can thank that thing. I remember I thought it would be interesting to acquire some of the tools made in Sheffield. That's a German-made brace, by the way, that particular one. It's somebody called, from memory, P. Schmidt that's marked on it. And there's nothing wrong with that, of course, but I thought it'd be nice to have something from Sheffield. And across the road from where Father worked was Joseph Rogers' works, just down the road. And we had a contact there. So I asked this contact, was there anybody who got any old hammers at all? And I went in with him one day, and he talked to their last hand forger of blades for pocket knives, and Mr. Arthur Judge, who was almost ready for retiring, said he can have this hammer, and he gave me a series of blades as well. So that was another very early. Now those things are worth their weight in gold because they are unrepeatable. You cannot get them ever again. They are hand forged and they are exquisite in their form, absolutely. And I suppose most people, of course, will collect planes, things like this, or the same thing made in wood. Everybody collects planes. For the first year or two, I never even got a plane. Ages before I got a plane. I suppose we might have 2,000 or 3,000 now, I can't remember. We've got some very important planes now, but at the beginning we had none. And but eventually people started giving me odds and ends, as the local church magazine fella said, would I give him a little story to write, and they did, and people read it and brought bits and pieces to me. So I suppose that's how it happened, but it was very much there's nothing serious about it in the way of going out collecting in that manner at all. But over time, certainly as an example, in 1965 I went to a firm called William Marple's in the course of business to pick some tools up, and I was in the warehouse there, and their works manager came to see me, and he said to me, "Mr. Hawley?" I said, "Yes." He says, "You're interested in oak tools?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Well, our plane makers is going to finish, And they were actually the last manufacturers in the world to make planes of this sort. These are the wooden planes that used to be used by all joiners, pardon me, from the 18th century right through the 19th century and into the 20th. And halfway through the 20th century, trade got to a situation where machining came in, all sorts of things, metal planes, and these things, they were over. The day had passed. And so he said, I think that somebody ought to make a record of our plane makers. And he left me with that thought. So when I got back to the shop, I remembered a young man came in who'd been in the previous week. I hadn't seen him before. And he told me he'd worked for the Sheffield Photo Company. And so I said to him, could you be prepared to, or is it possible, to take a cinefilm, please? So I said, yes. I explained what it was. And the following Thursday, which was our half-day afternoon off, we went into William Marple's and we shot a film of plane making of bench planes. And that's the only record of bench plane making in the world. There are no others. That was it, purely by chance. So when we'd done this shooting and you get chatting to people, I said, well, what's going to happen to all this stuff then? Oh, he says, well, it'll burn it. So all the tools were made, most of the tools were made of wood, so it'll burn them. And they had stoves there, coke and wood burning stoves. So I thought, can I have one or two? So we found a cardboard box this size. We filled it. I got it home. I thought, this is all right, this lot here. So I sorted through it. So when I plucked up enough courage, went back again and again, and I got everything. Every single thing I could lay my hands on, I got. Now this is with the connivance, if that's the right word, of middle management at William Marple's. Eventually, the only thing that was left that I hadn't got were the benches, and you can't get them in a cardboard box. So I had to bite the bullet then and talk to the boss. So one day I rang up Mr. O'Connor Fenton. Oh, Mr. Fenton, I said, is it possible, please, I could have one of those benches out of the plane maker shop? You take them, Mr. Hawley, you take them. So Mr. Hawley took them. I had a Volvo estate at that time. I could get a lot of stuff in, and I crammed it full of stuff. So we have got one of probably the only collection of plane makers' tools left in the world. And we've got the records of how it's done as well. So that they're extremely important. And subsequently, and probably before, I was going around works that were closing down and all their equipment that they didn't want anymore. I was hoovering it up, if you like, until I've got this massive collection. No one else has got the tools to make other tools with, and that's what the Hawley collection, however many tools it's got. I suppose we tend to generalise and say we've about 100,000 tools. Not be far off. But all these, and I started taking cinefilms. So now we've got about 30 or 40 cinefilms on how things were made. Just wanted a recollection, not for any other purpose, and just to remind me, which way did it do that way, or did he turn it that way when he was doing the next job, and so on. So it started off in a small attache case, and as things got bigger, we have a garage that the car never goes in. So they got put in the garage, and when that got filled up, the garage had a flat roof, had another building built on top of that, and that also got built up. I have two 20-foot long huts at the top of the garden. They accepted things. I was involved with Wortley Forge, and I had a big room there that was full of stuff. I have something like 30 or 40 anvils in the collection. They were kept at another place called Mousehole Forge, and so the collection was spread around a bit. And so the paperwork was kept in the house, and there must have been tons and tons in weight. So it was quite a problem. I ran out of room, totally. And then I met a young lady called Janet Barnes. Janet Barnes was the curator of a beautiful little museum that used to be in Sheffield called the Ruskin Gallery. And I told her, purely just by chance, about my dilemma of this lot. And she rang me and said, later on, and said, do you think we could put an exhibition on? So we put this exhibition on in the gallery. It took a long time, more than a year, to set it up. And it stunned everybody, because no one in the city ever before had seen a range of things like that. And following on from that, that was extremely successful from her point of view. Different people were going in, so instead of the more elite of Sheffield, more working class people were going in, because they could relate to the things that were there, either joiners or people making tools, all sorts of things. So at any rate, so that led on to the fact that people became aware that this stuff was, I'd got it. And it was decided that at my impending doom, that something should be done in order that it should stay in Sheffield afterwards. So a trust was formed called the Ken Hawley Collection Trust, and the tools were passed over to that. And that's from that the University of Sheffield provided a building for nothing. It was an empty building. They bought this old building of around 1840, restored it beautifully to very high modern standards with computer terminals and Lord knows what, and said, get on with it. So I filled it full of stuff till we couldn't get any more in. And from then on, we've moved down to the Kelham Island Industrial Museum, where we have a gallery devoted to the Hawley collection, and that's where we are at this stage. So it's probably the best collection there is. I like to think so, and I think I've got good grounds for saying so. I'd like to see the collection that's competing.
Is there one?
I doubt it. Said modestly.